Welcome to Lawyerpreneur, where we discuss the alternate paths that allow lawyers to engage their entrepreneurialism and distinguish themselves from others, because being a lawyer doesn't have to mean doing business as usual. I'm your host, Jeremy Richter. Today's episode is brought to you by Alps Insurance, the nation's largest direct writer of lawyers' malpractice insurance. Founded for lawyers by lawyers over 30 years ago, Alps works directly with your firm. No broker or agent, and if you do have a claim, the Alps claims handling team is comprised of actual attorneys, all with private experience. Alps roots for the law firms they protect. They believe in your success and nurture your endeavors with industry-leading coverage, risk management resources, and accredited CLEs, offering practical advice for pioneering lawyers like you. And Alps has the slickest online application out there. Qualifying firms can apply, see rates, and bind coverage in about 20 minutes. Right now, you can get 25% off one CLE seminar from Alps. Go to alpsinsurance.com/CLE. That's ALPS insurance.com/CLE and use the promo code Lawyerpreneur upon checkout. In addition to the corporate sponsorship that helps pay for the hosting and transcription of the show, you can support Lawyerpreneur on Patreon at patreon.com/lawyerpreneur. For less than the cost of a .1, you can help pay for the time it takes in creating and editing Lawyerpreneur and receive copies of my two most recent books, Stop Putting Out Fires and Level Up Your Law Practice. Now, on to the interview. My guest today is Amanda Doucette. She is a tax lawyer practicing in Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, Canada. She's the author of the Tax Chick blog and the host of the Tax Chick podcast. Amanda, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
All right. So when you tell people, hey, I have a podcast about tax law, what's the response, the excitement level in that?
Not very excited. On like a scale of 1 to 10, usually it's about a 1, followed by a, why would you do that?
All right. So why do you do it?
Well, I do it because I've been practicing tax law now for over 10 years. And I felt like what I was noticing was a pattern. And every time I was working with business owners or taxpayers on things, there was this incredible fear. There was a fear of the tax system. There was a fear of not knowing what was going on. People were always coming to me in a panic. We were never coming in like a planning mode. People were coming after something bad had happened. And I realized that there's that connection between lack of knowledge and fear. And I always think that with knowledge comes power. And so I was having the same pep talks with my clients over and over and over again. And I thought, maybe I need to share this with the broader group of society, because I think everyone's entitled to the information. And I don't think that just by hearing the word tax, that should be enough to scare you off. I believe that tax is accessible to everyone. It's just how you present information.
All right. So have you seen, I guess your blog existed before the podcast. Is that true?
It did. So I started the blog in May of 2020 and the podcast started in August of 2020.
Okay. Same purpose with that, sharing information that people can find?
Exactly. I find some people like to listen versus read. So it was kind of two different audiences.
Okay. Have you seen any effects in your practice from, practicing your expertise in public and putting out information in a way that people can find the information, but also find you? So have you seen any effects on your law practice?
So yes, I have, but not in the way I anticipated that I would. So I think as we all, go down these creative ventures, we have a plan and we have a goal and it never works. So I had a plan, I had a goal. And I think my plan and my goal was actually to try to attract the end user. It was to look to the client themselves. And so I thought, if I start doing this, maybe I can start working more with startup businesses. I love working with women entrepreneurs. I can get my name out there. And I have, like, that piece has worked, but not to the extent that this other separate piece happened. And the other separate piece is I found this whole group of advisors who were in different professional disciplines, who were really looking to learn something about tax and were feeling super stressed because their client would come in to see them and they didn't know what was going on. And they were worried about losing the client. They're worried about looking stupid in front of the client. And they couldn't find somewhere that they can go for basic foundational tax information. So as a result, I now have all these new friends, these new professional friends, where we can do cross referrals and we can talk because they've got an area of expertise that I don't have. And that ended up being actually the biggest piece or the biggest result of the podcast and the blog, which was completely unintended, but fabulous.
All right. So here's why that's funny to me is because I had the exact same experience. Okay. So I started in 2016. I started my law blog, and listeners are probably rolling their eyes because they've heard this, like out of the 40 interviews, like they've probably heard this 30 times now, or a variation of it, is that I started my law blog in 2016. I thought, so I do insurance defense. My clients are insurance companies, the adjusters, the claims personnel, they're going to be the people who read this. But that did not turn out to be the situation. I was writing about things that other lawyers were interested in reading about, and they were the ones who were reading it and reaching out to me. And ultimately, what happened is now I know literally hundreds of lawyers that I never would have met if I hadn't done the writing, hadn't started the podcast, hadn't joined communities. Mm-hmm. And it has created a network of people that I have been able to get business from, send business to. But it wasn't the end user who was finding the information and utilizing it. It was people that I've established relationships with over time. And so I think that's just really interesting that you had the same exact experience.
And it's so strange because I think now the topics that I write about and the way I approach things is slightly different because now I know who's really listening and who's really watching. And so I'm really trying to cater it a little bit differently, perhaps. But it's definitely an unexpected surprise because you do have this new community. You create community, and community is really wonderful, especially during these times.
Yeah. So I started my podcast in March of 2020, which was just a couple months before yours. Mm-hmm. But I found the same thing with it, that it created opportunities for new communities. I've, now talked to 30 something lawyers who, are all doing innovative and interesting things and approaching their practices in innovative ways. And I think community, when we think about networking, it doesn't immediately come to mind that networking is community building, but I think that is becoming, if it wasn't always, it's becoming such an integral and important part of it, particularly, like you said, in this time where we're not getting to see people face to face. Maybe sometime in the next 6 months, we can get back to that or something looking like it. I know that's super optimistic, but, building a network of people that have deeper relationships is such a vital part of being an effective networker now.
I agree. And I think that the scope of networking is so much broader. I mean, I don't think you and I would have ended up on a call together had we not each been doing these endeavors. And so now I feel like my network has spanned countries, not just my province. And I think that when we thought of networking originally, the idea is, you go to a luncheon or you go to a wine and cheese, especially lawyers. You go to the wine and cheese, you go to the luncheon and you're trying to drive hard, right? You're trying to do the hard sale. And I always hated that. That just is not who I am. I am about a relationship builder. And if I like you, I'm more likely to refer business to you than if I don't like you. And so I need to get to know you. And I feel like with this sense of community, I'm actually getting to know people. I'm getting to know who they are, what's important to them, what makes them tick. And it's so great to have this broad referral network or just support to draw upon. I mean, we're all business owners. We're all kind of in this together. And sometimes you just need to talk to somebody else about what's going on.
All right. So let's talk a little bit more specifically. What have you done to find community among other people? You talked about people who are in business, that you found as a result of the blog and the podcast. What have you done to find that and cultivate those relationships? Or maybe it was happenstance, but how has that worked for you?
So I think it's evolved a little bit because, to be honest with you, LinkedIn has been a huge source of networking and community for me, but not really until about May of this past year. So before that time, I was on LinkedIn the way that a lot of people are on LinkedIn. So I updated my profile. I creeped on other people's profiles. I didn't really comment because that was scary. I certainly didn't post because that's scary. And so I wasn't really utilizing that. And starting in May, I thought, what the heck? I'm going to give this a try. It seems like everyone else is on LinkedIn. I'm going to go on LinkedIn. And I started posting. And I just took the risk. And what I found is that immediately as I started posting, I had people reaching out to me and saying, hey, do you want to chat? And initially the reaction is, well, this person's living in India or this person's living in Texas. Like, why would I ever need to talk to this person? But I found by taking these meetings and having these conversations, I started to build community. And then you talk to one person and they're like, you got to meet my friend so-and-so. And so then you meet them. And then I'm on the phone with someone else going, hey, you got to meet this other person I just met the other day. And it creates this great sense of community. So a lot of the community building has been through LinkedIn and has been through just having Zoom coffees with people, 15 minutes. I always try to do a couple of them a week. And really trying to engage on posts of other people and sort of to get involved in that kind of a way. I haven't joined a couple of those, I think they call them pods on LinkedIn. So I've been invited to a couple pods. And more recently, I retained Deb Fetter, who's a business coach. You've likely seen her on LinkedIn. So Deb Fetter has a really great active pod that I'm a part of that's a great business support. Outside of that, though, I think I've been looking at other forms of social media as well. So I'd always loved Instagram. It was a comfort for me. I don't really get Facebook, but I get Instagram. And so I had created an Instagram account for Tax Chick. And I found a whole new sense of community there. And there were a lot of other business owners across Canada who had started Instagram accounts. And so again, starting that support chain of supporting each other by commenting, by liking, and picking up the phone, having a chat. And I found that word just started to spread. And if I started to say yes every time that I was getting a request to chat, it was always this positive experience that led to something else. And that's really how I've been building the network over the last, 9 months or so.
I really like that. One of the things that I enjoy about following you on LinkedIn is, as much as there is substantive information, every Tuesday, there is also random tax trivia that isn't super utilitarian, but is interesting. So what has the response been to that, and what was the catalyst for that?
Well, it's so funny because tax trivia almost never happened on LinkedIn. So I know you and I were talking earlier about that kind of fear we have sometimes when we go to do something, we pull the trigger on something. That was tax trivia for me. I personally think tax is really interesting. I feel like I might be one of the minority in that, although in the course of being part of LinkedIn, I've met all these other people who love tax as much as I do. And I think tax is fascinating because tax intertwines with every aspect of our life. And it doesn't matter what country you live in, how old you are, tax is impacting you every day. And there's some really weird tax rules out there that are based on really weird policies. And I find that humorous. And so I thought, if I want to try to get people engaging in the topic and not being so afraid when they hear the word tax, I have to put something fun into the mix. And I like tax trivia. I used to run a young practitioners group here in Saskatoon. And before one of our events, I did this whole tax trivia. And I mean, the group, it was a good crowd because they were all tax lawyers and accountants, and they thought it was exciting too.
Sure.
But I thought, why not pass this to the greater society? So I actually planned it for Instagram because it seemed like a good Instagram thing. And then that morning I went to post on Instagram and I thought, should I post this on LinkedIn? What if people think I'm not with it? So I pressed send and I posted it and it went crazy. Like, people loved it. And so I realized that everyone needs a little dose of humor on LinkedIn as well. And it actually provoked some great conversations because depending on the week, some people will be from that state or from that country, and they'll provide a bit of background as to why the rule is the way it is, or link to another joke, or in a later week, someone will link back to an earlier week of what I've taught them. And it creates this great conversation and this great dialogue. And I find that when people talk about the stuff that I'm posting, what I hear about most often is Tax Trivia Tuesday and how much people look forward to it. and seeing the little pink pig show up on their screen. So I'll keep it up for as long as I can have trivia.
Well, good. I like it. All right. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about is I saw on one of your posts the other day, you talked about the decision to hire a business coach and how that has benefited your practice. And one of my business mentors and friends is Kurt Runger. And I've talked about him on here before, and he's hired numerous business coaches over the years and talks about how transformative that has been for him. And I think that most lawyers aren't interested in doing this. They have an aversion to it. A lot of us think, well, I'm good lawyers, so I'm also a good business person. And so how has that benefited you in your practice to have a business coach, and what has that looked like for you?
That's a great question. I think that my personality is such that I really love to learn, and I love to surround myself with people who know more than I do and who are savvier than I am, because I'm always reaching and I'm always trying to be better and to learn more. And that's just something I really love to do. I love to be challenged. And so I've always had a coach of some sort in my life, either a mentor or a coach of something. And I still have a lot of them in my life. But I've sort of more formalized that in the last year, because I realized that I was creating something a little bit different with the work I was doing with the tax chick. And I felt like I had a bit of an alter ego happening, where I had my tax chick alter ego, but then I was a tax lawyer by day. And they really shouldn't have been so separate, because the tax chick is really, truly who I am as a person. It's the way I communicate. It's the way I engage with my clients. It's what I believe, and it's what brings me joy in my life. And so I thought, how do I bring those two things together? And I'm also a fairly new partner in my firm. I've been a partner for the last 3 years. And I mean, frankly, in law school, they do not teach you how to run a business at all. You just get thrown into it, and it's scary. And so I started looking around for business coaches and kind of trying out a few people. And I ran into Deb Fetter on LinkedIn, and I had seen her speak at something. And I just felt this feeling like her soul and my soul, we could hang out. I just felt like she was my person. And so I signed up with her, and it's been life-changing. The push that she gives me and the way she breaks through kind of the mud, right? I mean, I think we all make excuses for why we can't do things, or, why this isn't working. And Deb is a no excuse kind of gal. And she just says, okay, well, let's move past that and fix it. Here's how we're going to fix it, and really keeps me on track and keeps me accountable, but also offers me support, because I think sometimes being a business owner can be very isolating, and it feels like you're never doing anything right. And so to have someone cheering you on and providing you with that support has been great. And she has a great community. So with her has also come her community and new friends that way. So that's my current business coach. And I actually had an episode of my podcast not long ago about the concept of business coaches, because I think it's something so important as well. And I was speaking with Emily Hersicorn, who's focusing on young lawyers. So if you kind of just come out of law school, your first couple of years, and she felt like nobody was offering coaching to young people. They were always coaching sort of more senior lawyers. And so she was talking about that importance of always having that coach in your life. And I wish I would have had a more formal coach in the formative years of my career, but at least I'm catching up now.
Yeah. All right. So something you said triggered a different question for me. The blogging and podcasting are certainly not traditional marketing in the way that most lawyers market. And having been doing this for a while now myself, and being in relationships with people who also do it, I've seen firms respond any number of different ways to their lawyers doing these different kinds of marketing that are non-traditional. And some firms are super supportive of it. Others are indifferent. Some respond adversely to it. So what has that been like for you?
I don't know if there's really been a response at all. I think it's, I'm one of the only people doing that, but I do have another one of my partners who has a very active Facebook account for her family law practice and does a lot of writing and a lot of blogging. And we've started doing more writing on our website for a firm. So I think it's something that, it fits my personality. So no one really blinked when I started doing it. To be honest with you, when I started doing it, it wasn't even really a marketing ploy. I believe that as lawyers, we have a greater responsibility to society to help the community and to provide service. And I find when it comes to issues of tax, there's not a lot of information out there that people trust and people feel comfortable with. And so it felt like I was fielding a lot of calls of people that, didn't need to hire me, just needed basic information. And so it really started as a way to provide information to that group of people, which of course was the end user at the time. And that's really what its purpose still is. And there's been this side sort of marketing aspect to it. But I love having conversations with people. And I love sharing those conversations with others. And I love to write. It's for me a real creative outlet. And so it's actually quite a joy to get to write my blog post every week. And I know for some people, they feel like that's not a good thing. For me, it's a creative outlet.
One of the things that we keep coming back to with you, and you just mentioned it here, is your attitude toward your job as being a service. And one of the things that I've seen that you've written before is the way that we provide service is what distinguishes the value of the service provided. So can you expound a little more on that, what it means, not only what it means, but what it means to you and how you practice that?
Well, I think that this concept can really be carried over into any profession or into any service provider that you hire. If you ask the question of, well, why are you choosing person A over person B? Even if they have the exact same qualifications and the exact same marks and all of those things, there's usually something intangible that separates the two of them. And the intangible that's good for me may not be the intangible that's good for you. And so when I look at the way I practice tax law, I think I fit for a lot of people, and for others, I don't.
Sure.
I don't pound the table. I don't get angry. I mean, I get angry at the government, but I'm not that, don't get me wrong. It gets me all fired up, but I'm not someone who's going to, go to bat for you if you don't have a case. I'm not someone that's going to scream at others for you. That's not my personality. And you have to be honest with me. And if you're not, I'm going to drop you. And that's kind of the person that I am. And I don't do tax law to make money. It is lucrative, but that's not why I do it. I do it because I love it and I want to help others, and the money flows from it. And so when I talk about tax and when I engage others about tax, I feel like I do it differently. And I don't do it differently from everybody. There's a whole pocket of tax lawyers that I've discovered that do it just like I do, which is awesome. But I believe in empowering my client. I'm not worried that they're not going to come back to me. I don't need to talk over their heads. I can quote subsections of the Income Tax Act. I'm qualified. I have a master's. I can do that. But I don't think that's why you hire me. I think you hire me because you want to have an actual conversation with me, person to person, where when you walk out of my office, you understand the basic principles of what we're doing. And if something has gone wrong, you understand how not to do that again. And that is so important to me. I don't ever want to talk over somebody. I don't ever want someone to feel uncomfortable being in a room with me. I want them to feel like we're a team and we're working on this together.
So when you start working with a new client, is that something you set out from the beginning, is this is how I like to work together, and you set those expectations for what that working relationship looks like?
To an extent, I'm finding that the longer I'm in my career, the less I have to do that, because typically it's a client of a client that's coming to me. And so they've already heard about me. So they're coming to me specifically because they know that's how I operate. And so that actually makes it a little easier because it's less time weeding out people that we aren't a good fit for each other. But I do consistently reinforce that, where if I'm in a meeting with a client and if they'll say, oh, we'll just deal with it, I'll say, no, we need to talk about this. I want you to understand why we're doing this. And I want you to make a decision. I'm not going to make the decision for you. And looking at different ways of approaching the information. I use a lot of diagrams, a lot of pictures, because I think a lot more people respond to a picture than to words. And I think because my background is not a business background, I don't have a math background, I don't have a commerce background. My background is psychology. I did not intend to be a tax lawyer. I was going to be a family law lawyer. And so I look at things very similar to the way my clients do. If I see a spreadsheet, I get stressed. So if you give me a picture, or if you give me a box of documents, like, I'm there. And I think there's different ways of approaching information, and I like exploring that with my clients.
All right. So one of the things that I've seen you post about is being more human in your law practice, which I think is something that we've touched on here. But you've also talked about how particularly during the last year, you have seen the more personal side of your clients' lives and vice versa. Because,
Mm-hmm.
a lot of times, like I was on a Zoom call yesterday with a client for an hour and a half, and, I'm in my son's room. And so they're seeing, the basketball goal on the one side and, the things on the wall. And like, we're all seeing into each other's lives in ways that never happened before. And maybe we never envisioned would happen. How has that affected your relationships with clients and your, ability to communicate, empathize, or however that's transpired?
I think there's two big things I've noticed. So one of the things I've noticed is I've actually gotten to know my clients better, because oftentimes, like, most of my clients are living in rural centers. So I have a lot of farming clients. And so for them to be driving into the city all the time to have face-to-face meetings, it just doesn't make sense. And so we'd have a lot of phone calls, or you'd exchange emails, but you wouldn't have that connection. Well, now, they just pop on their iPhone, we start a face chat or we start a Zoom chat, and then the phone gets passed around and I see the farm manager and I see the family dog and I see the new tractor they just bought. And we can have these conversations and see tone and facial expression and, pictures of the grandkids and things that we couldn't do before. And I find that it's creating a more regular connection with clients in a way that it wasn't before. So that's one of the things I've noticed. And the other thing is, I think it's made my clients more sympathetic and more aware of the fact that I'm a human being. And I mean, you're a lawyer too, so you've experienced this as well, where sometimes it's like I feel like I'm this machine. And, there's an instant response required. And, what could you possibly be doing at 5 o'clock at night? Those kind of things. And even if someone's not overtly saying it, they're thinking it, because they're thinking, I'm paying you a lot of money, you should be on this. And I would feel that pressure. And so I wouldn't set those appropriate boundaries. And I feel like now, after the last year, everyone's really become more empathetic. And when someone asks you, how are you? They actually mean it. They actually want to know, are you okay? How are things going? And there's a bit more understanding to timeframes and deadlines. And if you say you're sick, that means something in a way it didn't before. And if you say you're taking a holiday, good for you. I'm glad you're taking that rest. I'll get back. So those are the two things I've noticed have changed.
But I'll say most of my clients that I interact with on a daily basis are the insurance adjusters. And they went from working in, headquarters or centers where there are hundreds or at some places even thousands of employees to now they're working out of their house and they're not seeing anybody except immediate family for, like at all.
Yeah.
And so I have had in the last year more personal conversations with the adjusters that I talked to about exactly what you're talking about. How are you doing? And getting, having a real conversation about that and what they're experiencing and what I'm experiencing than ever before. And it has strengthened those relationships in a way that, they understand that, hey, even if they have a question about Alabama law and it's not even about a case that they're ever going to send me because they hope to resolve it before it gets to me, they know that I've always told them you could call me, but now they know me well enough to know, oh, he really means that when he says call me. Like, even if I don't get to bill you for it, just call me and we'll figure it out and go from there. And if I can make your job a little easier, fine. And that's not entirely altruistic. Like it is because I want to help them. But from a marketing and networking side, I want to help you because it strengthens our relationship and I'm going to stay top of mind and you're going to continue to send me business because we know each other and like each other and you trust me.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think also being a lawyer is hard. And so if you can practice law with people on the other side that you like and that you know something about, it just makes the day so much easier. And that's one thing I found is that by strengthening these relationships, it means that when I see that person's name pop up on my cell phone, I'm not going, oh no. Instead, I'm thinking, oh, this will be fun. I wonder what they're up to today. And it's more like a friend calling you. And there's just, I think you can get more things done. And it's not that you're massaging palms or that you're doing anything untoward. It's just by getting to know people and people's interests, I think you can solve problems in a much easier way because everyone has an interest and everyone has a reason for why they're doing things. And so by building these relationships, you solve problems.
I agree. And it's something that you're doing and that I strive to do is by educating your clients and providing information, whether it's, I'm sure you do it in your practice, but also the information you're sharing in your writing and podcast and making more information available. This is something came up in an interview with Lisa Lang that she's actually probably 2 episodes before this one airs. So if y'all haven't listened to Lisa Lang's, go ahead and do it after we finish this one. Is that some people are really closed off to the idea of sharing information publicly because they are worried that, you know, my client's not going to need me anymore if I share this information.
Exactly.
Well, they still do because they can't do it without you. But by sharing the information and by having that abundance mindset of there's always more where that came from, you are strengthening that relationship by exhibiting your expertise and enabling them to go deeper and further next time that you're not handling the surface level problems anymore. You're getting to the heart of things and able to go, I'm not just solving this problem at the moment, but we're creating a situation where you're not going to have this problem anymore. And we can tend to the other things that more deeply and greatly affect you. Absolutely. Yeah, no. And I mean, shout out to Lisa and her LinkedIn feed. It's great. I learned so much from Lisa. So I'm excited. I'm going to be listening to that episode too. I do think you're right. I think a lot of people are very fearful about sharing knowledge. And I believe that there's a lot of work for everybody. And I believe that if we all share our knowledge, you're right, we start to get to some deeper issues that need to be addressed. And I always say, like, I know about investing. I understand about different investment vehicles, but I don't want to deal with it. I still hire a financial advisor. That's not my area of expertise. It's not what I'm interested in. And I think most people are the same, that they are going to still stick to their corner. But if you can give them some knowledge, they'll ask better questions. They'll come to you before an emergency happens, and you can have a more lasting relationship with that person. All right. I think that's a really great place to end the interview. Before we go, I want you to tell people where they can find you and follow you and keep up. Wonderful. So I am on LinkedIn, Amanda Doucette. You can also find me on Instagram at tax.chick. I recently got on Clubhouse, still not sure what I'm doing, but I'm Tax Chick on Clubhouse. And my blog is the Tax Chick blog, if you Google that. And my podcast is available on all major podcast streaming services. And it's the Tax Chick podcast. All right. Thanks so much for your time, Amanda. Thank you very much. Thanks for listening, and I hope you've enjoyed today's show. Please take time to rate and subscribe at whatever podcatcher you're listening on. And if you want more from me, you can find me at jeremywrichter.com. You can also find me on Twitter at richterjw. And if you want the extra audio and benefits available at Patreon, you can become a patron at patreon.com/lawyerpreneur. Thanks for listening.